I already got pictures. Dana Wells, in the last moments of the assault and in the specific window before Brett Holloway could leave that corridor, had used her phone to photograph what had been done to her and then called 911. She had done this while Holloway was still in the building. She had done this while she was in pain she describes as unlike anything she had experienced before or since. And the photographs she took on her phone timestamped, location tagged, uploaded automatically to her cloud account before she had left the floor were already in the hands of the Clark County District Attorney's Office before Holloway had reached the building's front exit. That decision in the middle of something no one should have to survive, to think clearly enough to document before the evidence could be managed or denied is the kind of decision that investigators see rarely, that prosecutors describe as transformative for a case, and that judges reference from the bench at sentencing. It did not make what happened to Dana Wells acceptable. Nothing could do that. But it meant that the account Brett Holloway gave investigators 45 minutes later, in the security office of the Meridian Event Center with a Clark County detective across a table from him, had no space in which to operate. Dana had already told the story. She had told it in photographs and in a 911 call and in the clearest eyewitness account that responding Deputy Patrick Reyes would take in his 5 years on the job. Today we go through all of it. Who Dana Wells is. What Brett Holloway built inside the Meridian Event Center over the months before March 2nd. What happened in that corridor. The security footage that confirmed every detail of what Dana described. The investigation, the arrest, the guilty plea, the sentencing hearing where Dana Wells stood up and read a statement directly to the man who had assaulted her. And what every person, especially every person who works in a large venue, a hotel, an event space, or any workplace with controlled access corridors should understand about the specific predatory method this case documents. Dana Wells was 29 years old. She had grown up in Henderson, Nevada, and had built her adult professional life in Las Vegas's hospitality and events industry, a sector that employs a significant portion of the Clark County workforce, and that she had entered at 22, starting as a banquet server and working upward through event coordination to her current role as a freelance event production assistant. She was known in her professional network as reliable, detail-oriented, and good under pressure, the specific qualities that event production rewards. She had a reputation for knowing every building she worked in quickly and navigating it confidently. She had first worked at the Meridian Event Center 18 months before March 2nd, on a large corporate event, and had returned for several subsequent bookings. She knew the Meridian's layout. She knew several of the permanent staff. Brett Holloway was one of those staff. She had interacted with him in professional contexts across multiple events and had no documented reason to distrust him. He was senior operations staff. He had authority in the building. When he approached her on March 2nd with what he described as a logistical issue that needed her attention in the service corridor, she went with him because she had no reason not to. That trust, professional, contextually reasonable, extended to a person whose position in the building gave him plausible authority to request her follow is the specific mechanism this case is built around. Brett Holloway used his position. He used the building's geography. He used the credibility that comes with being the senior person in a space. And he had been planning to use all three of those things for months before March 2nd. The Meridian Event Center. The Meridian Event Center is a mid-sized commercial event venue in Las Vegas. Function rooms, ballroom space, professional kitchen, and the service infrastructure that large events require, loading docks, supply corridors, staff restrooms, and the specific category of back-of-house space that is designed for operational use and that most event guests never see. The service corridor on the building's north side connects the main kitchen to the loading area and contains, at its midpoint, a single-occupancy staff restroom that is not visible from either end of the corridor. It is not on the main event floor. It is not monitored by any camera that covers its interior. Holloway knew this. He worked there every week. He had known it for as long as he had been planning what he did on March 2nd. The event. On March 2nd, 2024, the Meridian Event Center was hosting a private corporate dinner for approximately 340 guests. Dana Wells was on site as a production assistant for the event's contracted coordination firm, responsible for vendor check-ins and AV logistics. Her work required her to move between the main ballroom, the service areas, and the loading dock throughout the evening. She was, in the normal course of her job on that night, already moving through back-of-house spaces regularly. Brett Holloway had been on duty as operations supervisor since 3 p.m. His job on an event night included overseeing the service corridor, the kitchen interface, and the back-of-house staff. His presence in the service corridor was unremarkable. His presence anywhere in the building was unremarkable. He was operations supervisor. He belonged everywhere. The camera system. The security footage timeline, as reconstructed by Detective Morse from 12 separate camera angles, shows the following. Between 7 p.m. and 9:45 p.m., Brett Holloway makes 11 separate visits to the North Service Corridor entrance, a frequency that the Meridian's general manager, reviewing the same footage later, confirmed was significantly higher than the operational requirement for a supervisor on a standard corporate dinner night. On 6 of those 11 visits, the footage shows Holloway pausing at the corridor entrance and looking back toward the main floor before entering. Looking back. Every time. Between 8:47 p.m. and 9:12 p.m., the security camera footage documents Brett Holloway approaching Dana Wells 3 separate times on the main event floor. The first approach is brief. He speaks to her for approximately 20 seconds and she moves away to continue her work. The second approach, at 9:01 p.m., lasts approximately 45 seconds. The third approach, at 9:12 p.m., ends with Dana Wells following Holloway toward the service corridor entrance. The camera captures them moving through the entrance together at 9:13 p.m. The timestamp at which Dana Wells is next captured on camera exiting the corridor, moving fast, phone in hand, is 9:27 p.m. 14 minutes. What he said. Dana Wells told investigators and later testified to what Brett Holloway said during each of the 3 approaches and during the walk to the corridor. In the first approach, he told her there was a discrepancy in the AV equipment inventory in the service storage area that needed her signature before the rental company could release it at the end of the evening. A plausible operational request. She told him she would come when she had a moment. In the second approach, he said the rental company was pressing for the sign-off and it would take 2 minutes. She agreed to come when she finished the task she was on. In the third approach, at 9:12 p.m., he said the rental rep was about to leave and she needed to come now or the equipment couldn't be cleared until morning, which would create a problem for the client. She went with him. 3 approaches. Each one building urgency. Each one deploying a specific piece of professional leverage: the client, the rental company, the timeline that made non-compliance feel like a professional failure. He had constructed a scenario in which the reasonable professional response was to follow him. And she was a professional. She followed him. I am going to describe what happened in that corridor and in that restroom at the level of accuracy the medical record and Dana Wells's own public testimony establish. I am not going to describe it for shock, and I am not going to describe it in more detail than the case requires. What the case requires is enough to understand what was done to Dana Wells and what it means that she survived it and documented it. Everything I describe here is in the public record. The corridor. When Dana Wells followed Brett Holloway into the North Service Corridor, there was no rental equipment representative. There was no inventory discrepancy. There was no operational issue requiring her signature. There was a corridor that Brett Holloway knew was not covered by the camera system beyond its entrance, that he knew was not frequently used during the dinner service portion of an event evening, and that ended at a staff restroom whose door locked from the inside. Holloway directed her toward the restroom, telling her the equipment was stored in the supply closet adjacent to it. When she reached the restroom door and turned to ask where the supply closet was, he was directly behind her. He pushed her through the door. He locked it. The assault lasted 14 minutes. The specific physical injuries Dana sustained documented by the medical team at Sunrise Hospital and Medical Center in the hours after the assault included blunt force trauma to the face, neck, and upper body, soft tissue injuries consistent with forceful restraint, and the injury category that gives this episode its title, and that the medical record documents with the specific clinical precision that serious bodily harm requires. During the assault, Holloway forcibly removed 4 of Dana Wells's teeth using his hands and using a tool that forensic analysis later identified as a modified dental pick recovered from his operations kit, which he carried on his person as part of his supervisor's toolkit. The 4 teeth were not recovered at the scene. I want to be direct about why this specific injury is documented and named in this episode rather than described obliquely. Dana Wells, in her public statement and in her testimony, named it. She named it because she said the specific nature of what was done to her is part of the record of what Brett Holloway is, and that record should be complete in public. The episode follows her lead. What was done to her is described with the accuracy she chose to bring to it, and for the reason she chose to bring it, because it happened, because it is documented, and because it should be known. The decision. Dana Wells has described publicly what happened in the final minutes of the assault. She has described the specific moment when Holloway's grip on her changed, when his attention shifted, briefly, to what he was doing with his hands rather than on restraining her. She has described using that shift to get her phone out of her jacket pocket, which she had kept on throughout the assault. She has described taking photographs. She has described sending them to her cloud account, something she did automatically, in a habit built from years of documenting event logistics before she had consciously decided to. She has described calling 911 while Holloway was still in the corridor outside the restroom door. Dana Wells's photographs, timestamped at 9:24 p.m. and 9:25 p.m. on March 2, 2024, were received by her cloud account server at 9:24 and 47 seconds p.m. and 9:25 and 12 seconds p.m. respectively. Her 911 call was logged at 9:26 and 3 seconds p.m. The first responding unit arrived at the Meridian Event Center at 9:31 p.m. Brett Holloway was detained at the building's front exit at 9:33 p.m. by security staff who had been notified by the Meridian's front desk after the 911 call was placed. He had not yet left the building. He had been in the lobby for approximately 6 minutes, apparently waiting. Dana Wells had called 911 63 seconds before he reached the exit. "Is everything okay?" His first words to law enforcement are a question about whether a guest has a problem. Not, "What's happening?" Not, "I heard someone call 911. Is everything okay?" as if he is a supervisor checking on his venue, not a man who 6 minutes earlier had been in a locked restroom with a woman whose injuries were currently being documented by a deputy 2 corridors away. The Meridian security director was contacted by Detective Morse at 10:17 p.m. that same night and provided immediate access to the full camera archive. Morse began her review at 10:44 p.m. By midnight on March 2nd, she had the complete timeline of Holloway's movements across the evening, the 11 corridor visits, the 3 approaches to Dana, the 9:13 p.m. entry, and the 9:27 p.m. footage of Dana exiting fast, phone in hand, moving toward the main floor. Every piece of what Dana had told Deputy Reyes was on those cameras. Every piece of it. Who Brett Holloway was. Brett Holloway had worked at the Meridian Event Center for 4 years before March 2, 2024. He had been promoted to operations supervisor 14 months before the assault. He had no prior criminal record of any kind. His employment evaluations were positive. His colleagues described him, in the post-arrest review conducted by the Meridian's HR department and later by investigators, as competent and professional, slightly distant, preferred working alone, but good at his job. No documented complaints. No documented incidents. He was known, among regular freelance event staff who worked the Meridian frequently, as someone who was knowledgeable about the building and occasionally helpful with operational questions. He had interacted with Dana Wells across 7 events over 18 months. He had her contact information in his phone because, in the normal course of production coordination, event supervisors and freelance coordinators exchange numbers. Nothing in those interactions, from Dana's account, had produced anything she had identified as concerning. What was on his phone? The forensic extraction of Brett Holloway's phone, conducted by the Clark County Digital Forensics Unit, produced an evidence profile that established the planning architecture of March 2nd with the same clinical completeness that Tyler Dunn's Notes app had established in episode 28, and that Nathan Boss's search history had established in episode 26. The phone's picture was not one of a man who had made an impulsive decision. It was the picture of a man who had been building toward a specific outcome for months. In his Photos app, 47 photographs of Dana Wells, taken without her knowledge across 5 separate events, beginning 8 months before March 2nd. Photographs taken from distances and angles that made clear they were not incidental or accidental. They were composed, deliberate images of a person who did not know she was being photographed. In his Notes app, a floor plan of the Meridian's North Service corridor, hand-drawn and annotated, including the restroom location, the camera coverage points, and a notation about the event schedule format that would produce the highest staff concentration on the main floor during the dinner service. In his messages, a conversation with a secondary number of burner, prepaid, purchased for cash in which Holloway discussed the event on March 2nd in terms that the prosecution characterized, in its opening statement, as a pre-event operational brief he was sending to himself. 8 months of photographs. A hand-drawn floor plan with camera coverage annotated. A self-directed operational brief for the specific event on which Dana Wells was working. And a modified dental pick in his operations kit that forensic analysis confirmed had been used in the assault. Brett Holloway did not make a decision on March 2nd. He made a decision at least 8 months earlier, documented that decision across months of deliberate preparation, and executed it when the event calendar gave him the specific operational conditions he had been waiting for. This was not impulsive. It was, in the specific legal language of Clark County's first-degree kidnapping and aggravated assault statutes, premeditated. March 9, 2024. The arrest. Brett Holloway had been released from the scene on March 2nd on a temporary detention hold while Morse completed the forensic extraction of his phone and the full security camera analysis. The formal arrest warrant was signed on March 8, 2024. Holloway was arrested at his Henderson residence at 8:22 a.m. on March 9th. "I've been expecting this." He had a week. 7 days between March 2nd and March 9th. And what he apparently did with some portion of those 7 days was arrive at the conclusion that the arrest was coming and prepare himself for it. He had seen his phone taken. He had been on the scene when Dana Wells gave her account to Deputy Reyes. He knew she had photographs. He had a week to understand that the version of events he might construct had already been outpaced by what Dana had documented before she left that corridor. And so he opened his door and he said, "I've been expecting this." The interview. 3 weeks later, Brett Holloway's attorney contacted the Clark County District Attorney's Office to discuss a plea agreement. The negotiation lasted 6 weeks. On September 18, 2024, Brett Holloway entered a guilty plea to aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, first-degree kidnapping, and mayhem under Nevada law. The plea agreement included a sentencing recommendation of 31 years in the Nevada Department of Corrections, with no eligibility for parole before year 20. The hearing. The sentencing hearing was held on November 14, 2024, in Clark County District Court, before Judge Susan Park. The courtroom was full. Dana Wells was present with her family. She had prepared a victim impact statement. She had chosen to deliver it in person, directly, with Brett Holloway present, rather than submit it in writing. She stood up and she read it. She read it in full, from a printed page, without breaking. It took 11 minutes. I am not going to summarize Dana Wells's victim impact statement. It is her statement and it belongs to her, and the public record of the sentencing proceedings makes it available in full for anyone who wants to read it. What I will do is describe what it was, as a document and as an act. It was precise. It described March 2nd with the same specific accuracy she had applied since 9:24 p.m., when she had taken the photographs. It described what the 8 months since had been like: the surgeries, the reconstruction, the specific practical alterations to her daily life and professional life and personal life that the assault had required. It described what it is to be the person who was targeted, who knows they were studied and photographed for 8 months without their knowledge, who knows that the space they trusted was surveyed and mapped by the person who intended to use it against them. It described, in terms she chose and phrased herself, what she wanted the court to understand about the sentence she was asking for. I documented what you did before you could leave. 11 minutes. She delivered the entire thing to the room and to Brett Holloway, and when she was done she sat down, and the courtroom was quiet for a long time before Judge Park spoke. The method and its specific danger. What Brett Holloway used on March 2nd is documented in the academic literature on workplace predation as authority exploitation, the use of a perpetrator's legitimate positional authority within an institutional context to manufacture compliance from a target without triggering the alarm that an equivalent request from a stranger would produce. Dana Wells was not naive. She was an experienced professional in her industry. She followed Brett Holloway because his request was operationally plausible and because he had professional authority in that building. The specific danger of authority exploitation is that it turns the target's professionalism and contextual trust into a vulnerability. The operational tells, in retrospect, 3 approaches across 35 minutes, each building urgency, each deploying specific professional leverage, were not visible to Dana in real time for the same reason they are not visible to most targets. Each individual approach was within the range of normal professional interaction. It is only in sequence, visible on security footage reviewed after the fact, that the pattern becomes apparent. This is why post-incident security review of camera footage is so important in workplace assault cases, and why Detective Morse's immediate access to the Meridian's full camera archive on the night of March 2nd was consequential. What workers in large venues and event spaces should know. If you work in an event venue, hotel, hospital, large office building, or any workplace with back-of-house or restricted access areas, the following guidance applies directly to the method documented in this case. First, verify operational requests that require you to move to an isolated area, especially if the request involves urgency. The vendor is about to leave is a pressure tactic that has a legitimate equivalent in real operations and that is equally available as a manipulation. A 30-second verification call to the front desk, the event coordinator, or a colleague costs nothing and confirms whether the request is real. Second, know your building's camera coverage. Not to surveil to understand which areas are monitored and which are not. A professional in a large venue should be able to identify whether a corridor they are asked to enter is covered by the building's security system. Third, tell someone where you are going. A message to a colleague heading to the North Corridor with Holloway Re-AV back in 10 creates a check-in architecture that makes isolation harder and investigation easier. None of this is victim blaming. Dana Wells did nothing wrong. These are operational practices that make workplaces safer for everyone in them, in the same way that locking a door at night is not a statement about whose fault a burglary would be. It is a practice that reduces vulnerability in a specific category of risk. Documentation as a safety practice. Dana Wells has spoken publicly and specifically about her decision to use her phone during the assault. She has said she does not know how to explain why that decision was available to her in that moment, that it was reflex and habit and something she had done as a professional hundreds of times in 1,000 different contexts. She has said she is glad she did it and she wants other people to know that it is possible and that it matters. The practical guidance from Dana's decision: if you are in a dangerous situation and have access to your phone, documentation, photographs, a live call, a voice recording can be the difference between a case that can be prosecuted and one that cannot. Dana's photographs, time-stamped and cloud uploaded before Brett Holloway reached the exit, established the physical fact of the assault in a form that was completely outside his control. He could not change what those photographs showed. He could not dispute the timestamps. He could not manage the evidence Dana had already sent to a server he had no access to. Documentation, done in the moment and uploaded automatically, is evidence that survives. The resources are in the description. The National Sexual Assault Hotline operates 24 hours. The Nevada Coalition to End Domestic and Sexual Violence provides specific resources for assault survivors in the state. The Crime Victims Compensation Program in Nevada provides financial assistance for medical costs, therapy, and other recovery expenses for crime victims. Dana Wells has associated herself publicly with advocacy organizations that provide resources for survivors of workplace assault. Links to those organizations are also in the description. That is the complete Brett Holloway case. 8 months of photographs. A hand-drawn floor plan with camera coverage marked. 3 approaches in 35 minutes. A locked door. 14 minutes. And a woman who made a decision, in the middle of something that was designed to leave her without recourse, that made every single calculation Brett Holloway had made across 8 months irrelevant. The thing about this case that I keep returning to is the cloud upload. Dana took the photographs. Her phone backed them up automatically, the same automatic backup that anyone with a cloud-linked camera roll has on their device, the ordinary unremarkable function of a phone doing what phones do. Those photographs were on a server in a data center somewhere before Dana had left the floor of that corridor. Before Holloway had reached the lobby. Before any deputy had arrived at the building. He had spent 8 months planning to get away with what he did. He had not planned for the cloud. Dana Wells is a 29-year-old event production professional who goes to work at large venues and does her job and knows every building she enters, and kept a piece of herself together in a room where everything had been designed to take it all away. She spent 11 months getting to a sentencing hearing. She stood up and read 11 minutes of truth directly to the man who had assaulted her. She said, "I documented what you did before you could leave." She said it because it was true and because she wanted him and the court and everyone in that room to know it. And then she sat down. If this video gave you something, the workplace safety guidance, the forensic detail, the understanding of what predatory targeting looks like in the specific context of a professional authority relationship, or just the knowledge that Dana Wells is out there and has chosen to speak about her case so that other people can be safer, please subscribe and turn on notifications. The Patreon is in the description. Drop a comment. Tell me what stayed with you. Dana's victim impact statement quote? The security footage timeline, 11 visits to that corridor entrance, looking back each time? Judge Park's sentencing remarks? The 63 seconds? I read every one. Take care of yourselves. I will see you in the next one.